Well, good morning here in Phoenix, Arizona. It's Valerie Milano. I'm the senior editor of the Hollywood Times, and I'm one of the lucky ones that have seen Ingress. And I want our guests here to introduce themselves, if you would, please. Thanks.
I'm Rachel Noel James. I'm the writer director of Ingress.
I'm Sienna Beckman. I'm a producer on Ingress.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being here, as I said. And this film is beautifully shot. And where was it filmed? I believe it was in Canada, but can you please tell us?
We actually filmed in Bainbridge Island, Washington State.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
is that where are we talking to you at? Where are you at right now?
So that's where I live. So I'm up in Bainbridge Island.
And I'm actually based in London, so I'm over across the pond.
Wow, we're kind of far from each other. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's raining here. How are you girls getting along?
Yep, very damp.
Yeah.
We got that in common anyway.
Yeah.
Um, so did you know any individuals that had mental illness issues? And how did this film come about?
So I think there definitely is an angle to this film that, does explore kind of the concepts of mental health and stigmas around what is normal. Um, when I was writing the film, I wasn't so much focused on that specific piece alone. It was more in, like, I have known people with various, diagnoses, various mental illness diagnoses. And I think what I wanted to explore within this world and this character was less any one particular diagnosis and more just the idea of how we as a culture tend to put people and things in very rigid boxes sometimes, or treat, diagnose, and set aside, as opposed to really exploring the possibilities of different ways of viewing the world, different perspectives, different ways our brains work, different ways we perceive reality. And so kind of exploring more of the what if rather than any one particular mental illness.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, and so that's how basically how you came to write this story was from knowing people. Talk more about that, please.
So um, this story was inspired, I think, from some experiences in my own life, both in terms of the relationship, moving between relationships, and kind of how confusing and complicated that can be when you're moving out of a relationship that you thought was the right one, and surprised by a new relationship, perhaps, that opens up all kinds of things that you didn't see in that other relationship. But then also, I grew up in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which, if you're in Phoenix, not far, but
Yes.
it's a town that's very rooted in the metaphysical and in kind of spirituality and art. And so I grew up with a physicist father and a mom who was into tarot, and she had a number of friends who did energy healing and channeling. And so I kind of came into this story more from the perspective of exploring these kinds of big concepts in terms of, quantum reality, the holographic universe, what is real, parallel realities, and then also this side of knowing actual people who were channels or who kind of explored these other realms of consciousness, I guess, and imagining, what it must be like in terms of the self-doubt and the uncertainty when you're exploring things that, the culture at large and a lot of people would look at and go, well, that's not anything I understand, that's not real. um, so kind of rooting it in this idea of how we as individuals can come to a place of trusting in our own experience and what feels true to us more than what other people would tell us is true about the world. And that was kind of the place where all of this sparked from.
Did this story, in your opinion, or either one of you can speak to it, need to be told? And what lessons would you like viewers to take from this work?
Sienna, if at any point you want to hop in, just raise a finger.
Yeah, go ahead. You go first. I can say something after.
I think so. What I like about this film is the word ingress means an opening or a
Yes.
way in. And so I think what I've experienced with early audiences of this film is that it does provide just that. for audiences, which it's kind of an opening and almost an invitation to just think about your own life, your own interactions, your own self a little bit differently. And there have been so many interesting conversations that have come out of this. People talking directly about, siblings or friends or spouses that are schizophrenic or have been diagnosed with a very specific mental illness, and how it gave them an avenue to having different kinds of conversations with them. People who are directly, much more rooted in those metaphysical communities saying, well, this doesn't feel like science fiction at all. This is just the world as I know it. And then other people who, really have tied into the grief and loss aspect of this, and kind of grieving a spouse or a loved one who's passed on, and kind of some of the openings this film gave them in terms of processing through those feelings. So I think it's pretty, what I like about it is it seems to touch each person a little bit differently depending on their personal experience.
Yeah, I will agree with what Rachel said. I think to echo that, I think this film kind of asks more questions than it answers, which I think is something that's really special, in the sense of kind of opening those conversations and allowing people to continue to think about the story and how it relates to their own personal lives long after the film has actually ended. And that's something that's also been consistent in the people that we've talked to after they've watched this movie, is they say, this is something that I've continued to think about afterwards, and it stayed with me after I watched it, which I think is something that's really interesting and important in terms of, art and creating art these days, where so many films, I think, I wish more films had more to say, I guess, or kind of more of an impact to have. So yeah, that's one of the things that I found this story was really special.
Well, yeah, you just said that a lot of people are going to come away with a lot of questions. I guess I'm one of the lucky ones that I get to ask them. So thank you. Understanding that this is a work of fiction, was there any scientific research that you guys needed to do before or during filming regarding the physics of parallel universes?
I did a lot of actually pleasure reading about some of these concepts. There's a book called The Holographic Universe that I just found completely fascinating, and some other resources that I got through my dad and just conversations with my dad. The thing that's kind of nice about this quantum physics space is it's science, but it's super gooey. And I think the thing that's fun about it is essentially the conclusion is we don't know anything. We don't know so many things we thought we knew. And so what I like about that as a jumping off space for writing a story is it gives you a lot of freedom to play without having to be married too specifically to any one interpretation of it. So I think lately we've seen a lot of interpretations of the multiverse in much bigger, Marvel movies and Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is a very different, bigger action, kind of. So when I started playing around with this concept, I wanted to do something different, and I wanted to root it much more in a very sort of nature-based, simple humanness that almost feels like I've experienced that. Is it possible that maybe I actually had this experience? Just to make it a little bit more relatable, I guess.
Love it. This might be a really silly question, but were there any bloopers from the film, especially like during more intense scenes?
Sienna, I would love for you to answer that first, because you were like watching everything that happened. Do you remember anything specific?
Yeah, what did we do? I mean, I think one of the more intense scenes, the ones towards the end where we had the character of Daniel talking to himself in the mirror, that was actually quite a specific and technical thing that we had to do. And I mean, I don't know about bloopers, but I think it was we had such a lovely cast and crew. I think there was just always just like such a warmth that if somebody were to like mess up or things were to happen, it would always just be like, you know what, we'll laugh it off and we'll take it again. I think working with as always, when you're working with children, there's always the kind of wild card. So one of the sweetest things I think that happened is when we had the tiny baby who's in the flashback, when Rachel's holding her. we were like all given like, okay, she's just woken up for a nap. Like we have to be really careful and quiet because she, Rachel was like, every single time I hold her, she just bursts into tears. I don't know why, it just happens because it was a friend of hers. So, but she came in and the baby woke up and she was just in the happiest mood. She was just so smiling and happy to see everybody, even though it was just like, that was adorable.
Yeah.
I don't know. Rachel, does any come to mind?
Well, just one that stands out. So a lot of the film, we used effects to have people appear or disappear, and most of them were actually, visual effects that we did. But we had this one location. It was in the bathroom. That's made me think of it, Sienna, where Daniel's talking to himself in the mirror, where we had a shower that had this little alcove tucked back. And so when we first were starting to set up the scene, our cinematographer was like, "Could you just tuck behind that thing real quick?" And so he actually set up the shot so that I just tucked myself behind, and then it looked like I disappeared. But then we had to do it a bunch of times because he keeping like, "Nope, I saw you. Nope, saw you again." So, but we got it. We nailed it on that last time, and it was such a cool thing to see it done practically.
Anything else that y'all want to talk about with the film? Because if not, I want to ask, what are you thinking about working on next?
I don't know. I think yeah, I mean I think it's something where it's just like, as with any kind of indie project, this was very much a passion project and a labor of love. And I think it was really Rachel and I both are so grateful for all of the people who kind of gave their time and their talents and their skills to this project, because I think at the end of the day it turned out so we're so happy with the result. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to mention. I think Rachel, you put it really very well in terms of where the kind of story came from. And I guess like, from my end, when Rachel first sent me the script, it was just kind of just something I had never read before, a story that I had never heard of. And it was so unique and so interesting and grounded in that way that Rachel was talking about, where it's like, and I think about this sometimes now in my life, and years after the movie is finished, where it's like, every time I get like a little ringing in my ears every once in a while, because sometimes it happens like with the tinnitus or whatever, I'm kind of like, did I just go into a different reality? Did that just happen to me? Like, did something? And it's something where it's a kind of, you're like, maybe, I don't know. Who knows?
Could be. Yeah. Yes. No, I think that all sounds good. And as far as next projects, we actually shot another feature in October of 2023, also on Bainbridge Island. We were able to utilize a lot of the same creative crew and wonderful community people that rallied around Ingress. The film is called Inheritance, and we are actually in the midst of post-production right now and hoping to start our festival run with that one in the next few months or so.
So are you working on that as well, Sienna?
Yes, yeah, I produced that one as well.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, please keep in touch with us. We're the HollywoodTimes.today, HollywoodTimes.net, and our YouTube channel is Hollywood Times Official. And how can we find you gals or the film? Any of the projects you're working on? How can we find you?
Yeah, I think so on Instagram we've got, so our company is at Emergence Films. The Ingress is at Ingress Film. I think Rachel, do you want to say your personal one?
Well, as far as keeping up with our projects, we have our website, which is emergencefilms.us, and that's where we will have project pages for each film we're working on, which will keep up to date. You can also find Sienna and I both on Instagram just by searching our full names. And yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again so much for all your time, and hope to meet you maybe in person one day. That'd be great.
I
Some
love
film
that.
festival. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you,
you so
Valerie.
much.
We appreciate your time.
Wonderful. Bye-bye.
Great. Take care. Bye.